think that when it comes to sexual orientation, it's useful to think of categories, and in some senses I think it's a useful sort of heuristic device. However, the relevance of categorizations to the study of sort of the nature of sexuality and sexual orientation is limited and can sometimes blind us to phenomena that go on outside the categories. So while it sort of does make sense, I think, to classify people into what I would call sexual minorities, in other words, anyone who deviates from the standard heterosexual pathway at all, sexual minorities and sort of majority heterosexual folks, the diversity within the sexual minority population is far greater than I think most people understand. And so when people talk about lesbian, gay, and bisexual people, it is useful as a way of sort of marking off a group of people with a shared history, a shared cultural and historical experience that is different from, your garden variety heterosexual individual. However, I think it's really easy to make the mistake then of sort of reifying that category and presuming too much, going into it. And missing some of the stuff that goes on outside the margins. I think in a lot of, historically, a lot of the research on sexual orientation has actually been very selective about who is allowed to be in research samples. So the people that have historically been systematically excluded are people with bisexual attractions, people who don't label their attractions, people whose attractions don't exactly match up with their behavior, people who come out very, very late in life and can't remember any early attractions. And often you find these little postscripts in the methods section. We excluded, these individuals because we weren't really sure what to make of them. And the assumption being that, these are sort of noise in the data. They aren't necessarily telling us, important stuff about sexual orientation. I think over time there's sort of been a growing consensus among researchers that may not have been noise in the data. That may have been, like the data with potentially the most to tell us about the phenomenon of sexual orientation. So I think in more recent research, we're starting to realize that the phenomena of same-sex sexuality in general is a lot more complicated than we thought it was.